Welcome back. David Penn here. Episode number 105 of the Professor Penn podcast. Here's a note to my producer, Tanner. We're going to call this episode Self-Image because I forgot to put it on the script. It's a 40-pager, and of course, I forgot the title. Glad to be here. I hope you're well. It's Thursday night. Just want to make sure I got the date right. Yes, it'll be the 11th of April. 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Got a lot of new people coming in, and we want to welcome you if you're new, coming in for the first time. I want to thank the people that are coming in. We are a political action community. I'm a pundit, a commentator, but really what I'm trying to do is politically organize a community of people, and there isn't an infinite number of things people can do politically, including just watching the podcast. That's actually a political act because you could be watching reels on TikTok, and instead we're here for an hour and a half together, and this is not always the most entertaining. Sometimes we get quite detailed and historical. Some of the stuff's difficult to work through. So I applaud you and thank you for being here. And one of the most important things that I am working on in my political community is how do we talk to each other? How do we talk to each other? And there's many dimensions of this. At a very minimal dimension is how about respectfully? How about elevating the dialogue? So I spend a lot of time in these political realms, and from time to time, all the time, like every couple of days, somebody goes off on me. Generally not face to face, but through some kind of digital medium, where they start calling me names and making assumptions about what I do and don't believe, which is impossible for them to intuit. In other words, if I would, for example, criticize the presentation of a Ron DeSantis supporter who was calling Trump supporters maggots, and I'd say, maggots, really? Do we have to talk to each other like that? I mean, I'm summarizing. I write it up much more eloquently, of course. And then they come back and they start making fun of me like I'm a dummy because I support President Trump. Not even knowing if I have any support for President Trump, which, as my loyal and constant listeners and viewers know, I've said, I don't know, we're getting close to 10 times, President Trump is not my cup of tea. And I'm not interested in any of these politicians really per se. I'm interested in the ideas of the movement and the entry of American citizens into the political process. As I said on Tuesday night's podcast, we just had our Senate District 45 convention this past weekend in Minnetonka, Minnesota, and half the people were there for the first time. Raise your hand if you're here for the first time. Half the hands went up. Those people, they came in with intent. They didn't just, well, what do we want to do this weekend, Marge? Maybe we should go hang out with the Republicans. It wasn't like that. These people are deeply engaged in consuming media and sorting through the media and developing a worldview. And we got one group of people that are calling the other group of people, maggots, and we got another group of people calling the other group of people whatever they call them. So one level of this communication is an American community is based on listening and respecting each other. And I see just as much vituperative language coming from the various factions on the so-called right. And I say it's so-called because I don't even think these people know where they stand, a lot of them, as it is on the left. And I know that I sometimes fall into this because I do. I mean, it's easy to just lose your center and go, hey, that's not too smart. But when you start using the words you and you start putting people down, the listening stops. And if you're following me on X, and I really ask you to come to X and follow because we can support each other and repost. We need to build our social networks, each one of us. And I tell this story all the time to the people in my age cohort because we're basically technologically illiterate as a group. And I say to them, hey, in December 2020, I didn't know what a podcast was. In December 2022, I didn't know what a podcast was. In December 2020, I was not involved in politics. I mean, I was politically aware and I was involved in all kinds of, living my life, I was involved in a lot of political activities, but it's making a commitment to getting involved in the political process. I made that, right after that 2020 election. And then learning how to use all this technology and to start to build my own social networks and to spread a message. It never occurred to me before the end of 2022. And and I'm not bragging. I got thousands of people that I'm affecting, and it's not anything to be proud of. It's burdensome, but I believe it has to be done, and I'm appealing to you to do it because this is how we change the future and the present by talking to each other. So that one level is just speaking respectfully is a big step forward if we could get there. But the next thing is, when we talk to people that have views that are different than our own, we have to have compelling and convincing arguments or presentations of the ideas that resonate with other people. Looking at someone and going, you're stupid, probably is not going to be very effective. Or you're a maggot. Or you're this or you're that. In fact, as I've said before, when we talk with each other, and even if it's interpersonal with our spouses, our girlfriends, our boyfriends, our husbands, our children, our parents, avoiding the word you, Y-O-U, looking at you as the gateway to a breakdown of listening, because people get defensive. If you come to me and say, you, Professor Penn, you are this and you are that, I'm going to say, whoa. So I like to focus on the I statement, how I feel, what I know. Like, for example, that first piece, if it got through the censors, that's the famous Donny Hathaway playing a song called The Ghetto. That's from the 60s. That's what you call a stone groove. And, I played music just like that. I understand music just like that. Like when Donnie looked over at the guy playing the bongos and they were like in a moment of connectivity. That's why we did it. Because we weren't me and you. It was us. We had a connectivity that was not about materialism, because that kind of music is supra-material. There's a material element. For those of you that maybe have not thought about this or no one's ever said this to you, I said we're going to do a lot of drumming because drumming gets me in the mood to present. Piano is a percussion instrument. And I played that piece because I when we had Bernard Purdy on Tuesday, and he's just playing solo drums, and that was so cool. And now this is cool. And this is Hathaway using the piano as a rhythm instrument. And if you go back and listen to it, and then he expands it and turns it into a chordal structure, it's genius. And then that look he gives the guy playing percussion, that connectivity, that's the kind of spiritual skill that comes from participating in secret societies like music. It's a secret society. Now, if you're a musician, and I know I got some musicians in the audience, and good evening to you, you get it. But if you've never taken it out on the edge and spent, 2-3 hours a day practicing for maybe 10 or 20 years to get good at an axe, because they call them an axe, and I don't know what they call them today, but in my day, they called it an axe. Because an axe is another instrument. I want to just, if you want to find that spiritual, here's one way to do it. Buy an axe and start chopping wood. I think that's one of the most spiritual activities that can develop out of a very material kind of physical pursuit. But when you give over to swinging that axe, first of all, if you do it wrong, you're going to hurt yourself. So there's an element of danger. And anytime there's an element of danger, we bring more of our awareness and focus to the event. For example, you're watching me on a small screen right now, probably, likely not too dangerous, unless some like a meteor could hit your house. Other than that, this is a pretty safe deal. But if we were all outside, the hundreds of people that are watching, and I had an axe for every one of you, and everybody started chopping down trees, hey, we'd be paying real close attention because a small miscalculation can lead to death by bleeding. So those kind of activities bring us beyond our normal frame of reference. And music, that kind of drumming, that kind of that that band. I mean, those guys were that's why they call it a band. Band of brothers and sisters, a band of human beings giving up their individuality to some degree, giving over to the group energy to create music. And what is music? Is that material? I mean, we got a recording of it, but man, when you're sitting in there playing it, you have no idea what's going to happen next. I mean, you have an outline. And I used to think back when I used to play a lot. Uh, I mean, if the guy played the same music over and over, like if we were gigging and the guitar player played the exact same solo, you know, 4 or 5 nights in a row, somebody in the band would say, we got to get rid of this guy because he's not very creative. So, there's a creativity that comes in that connectivity that links the human consciousness to something beyond itself. And that is such a great feeling. We're talking about human well being, and well being is a feeling, it's a state of knowing you're well. I feel better just talking to you tonight. I've got so much going on, I'm under so much pressure. And I wake up feeling oppressed. And I said to myself this morning, I got to quit this. And well, one of the way, I mean, a real high point for me is when I'm in the live chat with you because I'm getting to look back and say, what did I say? Most of the time, I don't even remember what I said. I don't remember. I'm scripted, but that's just like an outline, like, a 1-4-5, like this kind of music. It's really quite simple musically, but creatively, it's infinite in its complexity. And that's what's so cool about this. So music is a secret society. We've talked about it. Chopping wood is a secret society. Give it a whirl. Go out into go to the store. If you don't have one, get yourself an axe and go out into the woods and chop down a tree. That is a spiritual experience. And then there is the traditional uh, religious community where people get together to pray, and the whole point is to very systematically give over to something greater than myself. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light in the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for my American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your only Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. I had a day yesterday where I was relatively sin-free. You know, you got to take it a day at a time, right? I was praying and I was thinking about a meme that I saw. Somebody posted on X, and they said the meme was science will take us to the moon and religion crashes planes into buildings. And the contradiction in that, the lack of insight, really typifies what we're going to start working on here going forward over the next podcasts, because we have become utterly and hopelessly dependent on materialism, and the relationship of our scientific prowess, the blowback that comes from the scientific method. And what was the trip to the moon? It's a big-ass rocket that was really developed to deliver thermonuclear warheads. That's where that technology came from. And then, oh, well, let's have a race to the moon. Okay, great. I mean, nobody's going to the moon these days, but there's a lot of thermonuclear warheads. And so, people go, we don't like this paradigm of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which coerces the world with science and finance. We don't like that. We don't like it at all. So the guy that came up with this meme saw no relationship between that rocket, which was technologically really aimed at delivering mass death. And the cover story was how they wrapped that in the cloth of faith was, oh, man has gone to the moon. What a great accomplishment. But that's not what it was really about. That was a cover story of a program that was really run by a Nazi, Werner von Braun, who came over here on Operation Paperclip, which is a whole other story, and brought all of his Nazi scientists with him and went to work for the U.S. government. Might have something to do with how we ended up being so Darwinist over here. But actually, we were Darwinists before the war. That's why they all fit together so nicely. That's why we went to the moon. A cover story for a thermonuclear delivery device. And that meme writer could see no relationship between that technology and the hijacking of planes and the flying of them into the buildings. And I know there's all kinds of other narratives here, so please let's stay away from that for now and just stay into the lack of insight that our thinking lacks the insight about how these things are related. Well, we're going to start relating them. Let me read something to you. I came across this. Beautiful. This is Nikita Khrushchev writing to John Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1963. This was actually posted by RFK Jr., who is a candidate for president, as you know, and who's being widely pilloried by the left because they view him as a threat to take away votes from Joe Biden. So they're trying to turn him into some kind of a charlatan. And then he posts this with no comment, This was written by Nikita Khrushchev to his uncle, the martyred President John Kennedy. Just being able to post this is, I didn't know this had been written. And, I haven't verified it, but I'm just going to assume that RFK Jr. was posting something that he knows about, and I'm going to read it to you. This is from Khrushchev to Kennedy. If you did this, i.e. imposing the quarantine on Cuba, if you did this as the first step towards the unleashing of war, well then, it is evident that nothing else is left to us but to accept this challenge of yours. If, however, you have not lost your self-control and sensibly conceive what this might lead to, then, Mr. President, we and you ought not to pull on the ends of the rope in which you have tied the knot of war. Because the more the two of us pull, the tighter that knot will be tied. And a moment may come when that knot will be tied so tight that even he who tied it will not have the strength to untie it, and then it will be necessary to cut that knot. And what that would mean is not for me to explain to you, because you yourself understand perfectly of what terrible forces our countries dispose. Consequently, if there is no intention to tighten that knot, and thereby to doom the world to the catastrophe of thermonuclear war, then let us not only relax the forces pulling on the ends of the rope, let us take measures to untie that knot. We are ready for this. That's a Russian premier speaking to a U.S. president in 1963. And of course, President Kennedy had not lost his self-control, and he did sensibly conceive where that crisis could lead to. So why did RFK Jr. post this? He posted it because this is right now going on with the forces of the globalists, and I'm going to say that, I notice when I use the word globalist or I use the word uniparty, the leftists just go, well, he's a Trumper. No, you guys need to do a little bit of study. I'm not saying that it's the only description of reality, but you'll be benefited by understanding that description of reality, because there is a group of people in our country that are tugging on that rope and tying that knot so that knot is getting so tight that it's going to be impossible to untie it. And so if in 1963, at the height of the Cold War, where the United States and Russia were really squared off and they were ready to go, and I was alive and I was there, and the fear was palpable. It was palpable. You could feel it. And that wasn't just my parents who were educated. It was the entire society was glued to their television sets, terrified that the end was near. I'm going to tell you, the end's a lot closer right now than it was then. And who really cares? I mean, everybody's in their phones looking at TikTok and Instagram and getting high, and the restaurants are filled even though nobody has any money. I'm stunned by this. So let me just end with one more prayer. End this segment. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark and granting humankind the power to choose. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring sight to the blind and feelings to the victims. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, gracious and ever willing to forgive. Thank you for granting the people an awakening. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for removing the cloak of darkness for those with eyes to see. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing from the curses, the spells, and the rituals that ensnare me. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for offering mankind salvation and to choose spiritual borders instead of the addiction to sin. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for all who speak out against evil, who walk by faith and not by sight, so that the truth will set us free. The news that matters. The news that matters is very interesting this week. I say that prayer in the hopes that we'll be able to create the space for the folks that really know what's going on to come forward. There's a lot of fear. If you're on the payroll, like the 2 million active duty and veterans that we the people invest $1 trillion in every year, 1 trillion. These people are on the payroll. There's a lot of fear that if you start speaking out against the machine, someone might take your iron rice bowl away from you, or you may be ostracized by the people that you hang around with. There is a lot of mechanisms of social control, both material and spiritual. And those mechanisms are powerful. And I am praying, and I'm asking you to think about joining me in a prayer where people can become liberated from those mechanisms and start to tell we the people what they know so that the truth will set us free from the hell within which I am ensnared. And it happens in really strange ways. I've been to Turkey maybe a dozen times, which is strange because I'm a Jewish American in their eyes. And, the first time I went to Turkey, it was scary for me because it's a Muslim country and it's not a, reformed Islam there. The president of Turkey, President Erdogan, was a Muslim fundamentalist politician who has in large part undone the secular humanist formation of the Turkish culture, which was put in place by the great Ataturk, who modernized Turkey after the Ottoman Empire fell apart. In other words, there was an Islamic empire, the Ottoman Empire, that was defeated. And as often happens in defeat, the intelligentsia, the elites of that society adopted the culture as much as they could of the people that beat them, which was, the British and the West. So Ataturk created a secular state, a westernized educational system. Turkey's actually a NATO member. Think about that. I mean, this is a really Islamicist state that's a member of NATO. So Turkey is a really complicated place. I actually enjoyed going to Turkey very much. First of all, the food is tremendous. It was interesting to be in an Islamic country. The call to prayer every morning woke me up in my hotel room. I thought that was chilling at first, and I eventually came to like it because, that prayer, that prayer is sung, is pretty close to the prayers that I know. So I could see that connectivity. I had some Turkish people that I met that I liked very much. Actually, the way it worked out there for me, because I was there um, from a business perspective, the president of Turkey, Erdogan, went on a massive industrial development program, and they borrowed a lot of money to modernize the Turkish economy and turn it into an industrial export powerhouse, much like China. And Turkey sits at the crossroads of the world. They built the most badass international airport in the world. Turkish Airlines owns more airplanes than any other airline in the world. They have the second largest military in NATO, second only to the United States, and they use it. They're actively engaged in war throughout the Middle East and even into Africa. Erdogan was a very unique political figure. He was interested in no longer having Turkey be completely dependent on the man, so to speak. He sought to lessen the dependency of the Turkish people and the Turkish government on the West. He struck out in an independent direction, and he started working with the Russians and the Chinese and drove the policymakers in the United States wild. So he had done all of this financial investment, and things don't go the way you plan. I mean, he didn't plan on the 2008 financial crisis. He didn't plan on the breaking down of globalization. I mean, there's things that, this is what people do. They say, oh, this thing's going on forever. I want to get in on it. And just when they get in the blocks, things start coming undone. So they've had a very hard time with their debt. So what did they do? Well, much like the United States, they just started printing money. When you print money, you get inflation. Turkey is a cautionary tale for the United States of America. The official inflation rate, the official rate in Turkey is 70%. But when you're there and you talk to the people, they'll tell you it's like 200% annually. That means like every month whatever you bought last month costs 10% more this month. And then the government's trapped. It just keeps, printing more money so the people don't go out in the street with, pitchforks and torches. And this has been going on. Erdogan has been in power since the 90s, and he's been the top dog for 20 years. And they just had an election there. And I'm just bringing this up as a metaphor for what might happen here in the United States. Because as I was coming on air today, inflation is being reported at a much higher rate than had been predicted. And I just talked about this last Tuesday. If you're printing money, you're going to have inflation. Okay, that's just the way it is. And this inflation rate, Erdogan's been winning election after election after election. His party's been in power for 20 years, and it came to an end last week where the Republican People's Party, the CHP, made tremendous electoral gains throughout the country. And this has a geopolitical dimension because if Erdogan actually loses power there, it's a jump ball about how the Turks are going to go forward. Most likely, they're going to retilt to a more pro-American, pro-Western stance and fold in their traditional role as a NATO member because they're going to say, please, can we have some of that printed money you're printing over there in the United States of America? It'll help us stabilize our debt because they're they're going to go one way or the other. Now, what Erdogan has been doing is he's got chips on the Russians, chips on the Chinese, chips on the Americans, and he's trying to sell out to the highest bidder. It's not working for him because nobody trusts him. And they've been letting that inflation, nobody's intervened, and that inflation's eating up that society. Plus, when the United States, well, let's call it the United Nations, decided to knock Bashar al-Assad out as the president of Syria, and there's been a complete breakdown. Syria is a failed state, and the Russians came in and supported Syria. That war, there was millions of Syrians, which has a border with Turkey, that fled that war right into Turkey. So they also have an immigration problem. But interestingly, they don't complain about it. I have a friend there. We were talking. He's got a Syrian family living in his basement that he's supporting. They got a different view of things. There's a little spiritual aspect to being Islamic. In the meantime, President Biden came out, and we talked about it on the podcast last week, and made demands about Israel. People said, oh, wow. Because he was responding to the intense protests, mostly by young people, who recognized the contradiction in the Democrat Party, allegedly and formerly the party of the anti-war movement, now funding wars throughout the world. And, these young people, after going to college that the U.S. government paid for, and they were taught that white settler colonialism and imperialism is bad, they're starting to question this whole Democrat Party support of imperialism. And Biden came out and he said, President Netanyahu, you must do this, you must do that, or we're going to remove our support. And so like a day later, everything that Biden asked for, the Israelis did. Must not ask for very much because it was easy for him to do it. And I got a kick out of this. They asked Biden, I'm just going to read this to you. A reporter asked him, I got to read the whole thing. Just give me a second. It's worth it. He goes, the reporter said, when asked on Friday this is last Friday, before boarding Air Force One, if he was threatening to cut off military aid to Israel, Biden said, I asked them to do what they're doing. In other words, Biden's will be done. And then he was also asked if he was abandoning Israel, and he replied, are you serious? So this whole thing was a charade. And, Israel is going to continue its activities there. And I was looking at some films of a Gazan city called Khan Yunis. There's nothing left there, okay? Nothing. There's no people there. There's no undamaged buildings. The place is destroyed. It was destroyed. There's nothing left to go back to. I mean, this at the very least is cultural genocide. At the least. And I'm saying that as a Jewish person. I got called like I see it. For all the Jewish people that are going to say I'm a Jew hater, I'm not. I'm just saying it is what it is. Let's not wrap it in something that it's not. And for everybody else, let me also say, the Israelis have been living with a murderous force on their border for years. And Netanyahu in his older age has decided that he's going to go down in Jewish history as the great warrior that ended this problem. That's what they're doing. I mean, we don't have to talk about what they're doing. We can see it for ourselves with our own eyes. So let's not try to pretty it up. On the one hand, these people have been unwilling to make peace with Israel. Period. They have been trying to get rid of Israel since 49. They never accepted that there was going to be Jews in Palestine. Okay, great. That's their perspective. The Jews work with them for, I don't know, since 49, with wars in between. I'm not saying anybody's right or wrong. I'm just saying the history dictates that these folks have not sat down to make a peace. And what Netanyahu has done is he said, okay, no peace, fine, we'll finish this. And that's what's going on. And Biden is saying, are you kidding? Of course I'm going to keep arming these people. In fact, we just sent them 25 F-35 jets, the most modern kit we got. We won't even give it to the Turks. They can't have it. Special people only get the best shit. And 500,000 Democrat voters have made protest votes against Biden in recent primaries. Interesting. According to the publication The Nation, 530,000 people voted uncommitted or uninstructed when available on the ballot. That's a big deal, right? I mean, some of these people are just not going to vote for Biden unless this thing gets resolved. This thing keeps going. These voters are not coming back. And it's not just, if you're watching and you're anti-Israel and you're really questioning American imperialism, it's not just Gaza. Okay, the same thing's going on in Ukraine. The same thing's going on in the South China Sea. The United States, Philippines, Japan, and Australia have conducted their first joint military exercises in the South China Sea. According to Japan's Kyodo News, the drills marked the first, quote, full-scale exercises between the four countries. The United States has been looking to increase military cooperation between its treaty allies in the region as part of what? Its military buildup to prepare for a future war with China. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? You got a European theater, you got a Middle East theater, you got an Asian theater. It's just like World War II. Let's get the old band together. Let's do it again. It's been 80 years. Nobody remembers. Hey, 88 million people died in 5 years. They're all dead now. All the people that saw that happen. I wasn't there. My father's dead. My father lived through it. My mother is, close to 90 years old. As soon as all these people with an institutional memory of what that was like go away, the memory's gone. Guess what? Time to do it again. It's good for business. In the meantime, the Chinese, their economy is tanking because interest rates such as they are, the dollar such as it is, U.S. consumer spending such as it is, which I'm going to tell you, nobody's buying anything because they don't have any money. The Chinese, all of a sudden, they're popping up and saying, we're the most wonderful guys in the world. Come on back. So who shows up? Well, who shows up is some of our most globalist business leaders. There was a meeting held this past week in the Great Hall of the People, which is, hey, that's a big deal, right? That's the Great Hall of the People. Who showed up? Guess who? Blackstone's Stephen Schwarzman, Qualcomm's Cristino Amon, FedEx's Raj Subramanian, Chubb's Evan Greenberg, Bloomberg's Mark Carney, the leader of the president of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, Stephen Orleans, and Craig Allen, president of the U.S.-China Business Council. They all got together, and they all agreed it's time to make money together. Isn't that nice? So we got our top business leaders. They're allegedly Americans, kind of. They got American passports, but they're out there cutting a deal and selling the American people right down the stream. Fine. Isn't that great? And then, of course, Elizabeth Warren and these people, Bernie Sanders, Robert Reich, they're out there banging on the corporations and the tax rates. Do you think if you had $300 billion and you were picking up 10% a year on that, right? $30 billion. $30 billion. on interest, right? Just putting the money in the, just your investments are making you $30 billion a year. Do you really think you give a shit if your tax rate is 20% or 40%? Do you think it really matters to you? I mean, really, how many steaks can you eat a day? How many Cadillacs can you drive every day? How many girls can you have stashed away around the world? I mean, if you're getting $15 billion a year instead of $30 billion, let's say they tax 50%. Nay, let's say they tax 90%. And you only have $3 billion left of your $30 billion. You have to pay $27 billion in taxes. You only have $3 billion left. You can still only eat one steak a day. You can only drive one car a day. How many women can you really get with $3 billion? As many as you want. Sorry, ladies, if you're finding this crude, but these people are crude. So this whole scam about a wealth tax and it's the corporations. No, it's the government's policy. It's the government's policy that's making me poor. Doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, left, right, up, down, white, black, I don't care. Let's get focused on what the problem is. It's the government of the United States that we, the people, allegedly they represent me. And I don't think so. They're not. And, you know, they bring all these people over here to do this stuff, but at the same time, because China can't sell out, there's this tremendous overcapacity. Could you please play this piece? We're going to go through, and I'm just going to comment as we're going, and I'll give up when I can't take it anymore. And I want to make a upfront admission, because you know when it's my psychology, right? I want to share with you because I'm bent on this, because we're going to look at some outtakes of Janet Yellen, who is our Secretary of the Treasury. She's the same age as my mother. She looks exactly like my mother. She has the exact same hairstyle. And when I see her, well, for those of you who are old enough to remember Laurel and Hardy, Susquehanna. Look it up. It's be a cultural reference for you. Let's listen to Secretary Yellen.
Good evening here from Beijing, where Treasury Secretary Yellen just wrapped up a busy 5 days here in China. First, she was in Guangzhou in the south, and then in Beijing, where she met with numerous top officials, government officials, students at Peking University, took cultural tours. She received a warm welcome here everywhere she went, Frank, but did deliver a tough message, particularly when it comes to this issue of overcapacity, this idea that Chinese government has been subsidizing industries like EVs, lithium-ion batteries, and solar panels, flooding the world with these cheap exports. So that's where I started our conversation.
Well, they certainly listened, and I think they understood that this is something that's very important to the U.S., but as I emphasized, and I think they've also heard, we're not the only country that's concerned about a flood of Chinese exports wiping out important firms and industries in our country. And clean energy is something that is an innovative area that will be growing over time. We want to make sure that this is an opportunity for our workers and our firms to participate in this industry. Europe, Japan, other countries feel the same. It's fine for Chinese for China's firms to export in this industry, to develop it, but some of the techniques that they use, subsidizing their firms very heavily, and then supporting them even when they're losing money, when demand is weak relative to this great capacity to supply products like solar panels, prices just plummet, and it can drive our firms out of business.
Can you stop that, please? Okay, now this woman, Yellen, was formerly the chairman of the Fed. I'm playing this not because she's going to say anything profound. I'm playing it because what she's been saying, and you know, I've been to China 200 times. I've been doing business with Chinese companies since 1993. Had I not had a moment of I call it my Jerry Maguire moment. I've talked about this. And if you haven't watched the movie Jerry Maguire, have you seen Jerry Maguire? No, Tanner hasn't seen it. He didn't watch The Godfather yet either. But see, now that he's back, we're going to be on him about this. We're going to put a mic on him soon. Anyhow, I had what's called a Jerry Maguire moment. So for those of you that have seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. I woke up one day and I said, what am I doing here? These people hate me. Can't do it. And I went off on a path of trying to minimize what I was buying from China. And it really has almost bankrupted me because they control so much of the world's economy and so much of its hard goods supply that if you try to go against that, that's kind of like pissing into the ocean. It doesn't work. I'm just telling you, it doesn't work. And what Yellen is saying, I've been listening to American politicians and elected officials and appointed administration officials talk this way since 2000 and Bush. There's nothing new about what she's saying. They're just running out of grandma here because what are you going to say? Hey, grandma, you're an This is a cover-up of American policy, globalist policy, which supports a globalist economic enterprise, which I'm going to say originally there was probably some good intent in it, that if we have a global economic integration, there's going to be less war. Well, that didn't work, did it? So that obviously didn't work. This is just about making money now and who's making it. And this is just pure propaganda because there's not, and we're going to play through this a little bit more, there's not one new idea, not one policy. It was Trump actually that stood up and said, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm going to do something. And look what happened to him. He started undoing globalization, and what is Trump? A racist, a fascist, and a racist. And, of course, he's got his own flat spots, and those flat spots are getting exploited in the legal system, which we'll talk about in a second. Please continue. Please continue.
That's unacceptable from the U.S. point of view, and many of our allies feel the same way. So I think that they understand it. It's been part of their industrial strategy. It reflects the importance that they attach to advanced manufacturing. It also reflects a shortage of demand in their economy so that they're investing heavily in manufactured goods that can be exported. And these are things that really can lead to trade tensions going forward, which we would like to avoid.
Well, I was going to ask.
Stop, please. Trade tensions going forward. It couldn't be any more tense. We're conducting military operations 60 miles off their borders. The South China Sea is yet another theater of conflict. This argument has been going on since they put China into the WTO, and it's called mercantilism. It's not a lack of demand in China. They have a 1.5 billion population. There's plenty of demand there. And I'm going to tell you, the Chinese are making money, and their society reminds me of when I lived here in Minnesota in the 1960s. People are full of hope. They're full of opportunity. They're working their ass off. Everybody's happy. I mean, life is good there. In fact, I know Chinese people that live here in the United States that are saying, boy, what am I doing here? I want to go back. Life here sucks. It's good there. And here she's saying, oh, well, there's some trade tensions. We want to avoid that. It couldn't be any more tense. Come on. Let's continue.
I actually expect them to do anything about it. Already there was a headline today that the commerce minister in China said that those accusations are groundless.
Well, I do think that they understand where we're coming from, and they have agreed to continue an intensive dialogue on this issue.
Stop. Intensive dialogue. They've been having these intensive dialogues the entire time I've been involved in business. Intensive dialogue. Yeah, we're going to sit down and intensively talk. That's what this is all about. This is her selling me like I'm stupid, because the whole thing is predicated on me being stupid. But hey, I've been there 200 times. I'm involved with the Chinese. Now, let me just make a comment about this. I respect these people. When I first went to China, there was no cars. Everybody was on foot or on a bike. This people, the Chinese people, who are colonized people, colonized, colonized by Western powers and exploited, horribly exploited, mainly by the British. There they are again, our friends the Crown, which, gives you a bad attitude when you're colonized and your people are killed. And those folks have a memory, okay? This is a 5,000-year-old culture. So they teach history in their schools, and they know who the good guys and bad guys are from their street corner. So they got a colonial history, so colonial in fact that, the British took, for example, Hong Kong away from them. I mean, they took it. It was a British colony. Okay? I mean, and then the Japanese, oh boy, you want to talk about atrocities. World War II, we talk a lot about the Nazis and the Jews. Just take a little trip down Japan and China. The Japanese were brutal and way more. The Chinese bore the brunt of the dying in World War II. They were slaughtered. So they remember this stuff. And they don't have a good attitude about the West. How could they? How could they? And then what do we do after World War II? We become Japan's military and foreign policy. And the Japanese really took over our foreign policy. So here's China with a history of colonial exploitation and barbarism perpetrated on them by colonial invaders. Yeah, they sit around and they talk. And what they're talking for is, as long as we can keep you talking, we're going to keep robbing you, because they want revenge. But I want to say, the Chinese people that I know, a lot of them are very good people, hardworking people. They don't want war. They just want my money. They don't want war. That whole war thing that's going on over here, that's from our people. That's from our military, because that's how you sell big military expenditures. Oh, Russia and China, we need 6% of the GDP for military expenditure. That's what they're trying to get to, because, war is a racket. And you can only get so much money killing poor brown people driving around in Datsun pickups with 50 cals that are strapped on the back. It's not going to get you a big budget. But you start a war with Russia and China, and the money's going to pour in, and that's what we're going through. And see, what she's doing is she's covering up, because we got two things going on at once. None of these people want war. The Russians don't want war. The Chinese don't want war. And some of the people running our country don't want war. What they want is the rumor of war, because that's good for business, and they want to cover up all this stuff with intensive dialogue. Continue, please.
I think they understand it's important, and they do have tools that they could use, perhaps that would take a while to have an effect.
Like export restrictions?
Well, I'm not thinking so much of export restrictions as some shifts in their macroeconomic policy and a reduction in the amount of particularly local government subsidies to firms in these industries.
I was going to ask what's at stake economically, because...
Stop it for a second. Okay, so this is the way the Chinese do business. They have state capitalism. State capitalism. And guess what? So do we. Go look at the CHIPS Act. The CHIPS Act was a $56 billion taxpayer-funded investment in research and the creation of chip manufacturing technology here in Arizona. This government, our government, we the people, it's probably $500 billion a year going into the university systems, grants for research. How about $2 trillion or $3 trillion a year of funding money that goes into the economy and subsidizes everybody and everything? This is the kettle calling the coffee pot black. Why? I don't tell you what the real difference is, and you're not going to like it, or many of you are not going to like it. In my company, on Friday, I'm the only person in the office. Nobody really, I had a fight to get people to come back in after COVID. So we left Friday as a flex day, and I'm the only person that comes in. I'm the only person that works. I was in at 7. I'll be going home at 7 tonight. I work. I'm from another generation. But the work productivity, the willingness to work in our culture has declined in relation to government largesse supporting each citizen. Because if you know you got Social Security and you know you got health care and you know you're going to get subsidized rent and on and on and on and on, because now we're forgiving student loans and et cetera and so on, as long as the government's got everybody dependent, they work less hard. Let me tell you how China works. The government doesn't provide anything to anybody. Parents are taken care of by children. If you don't work, you don't eat. I mean, they're running a very Darwinist kind of model over there. Now, where does the money go? It goes into the coffers of the Communist Party, which is in draconian control of that country. But they make their people work. That's the difference. The only difference is they want it, and we already have it. And what do they want? They want what we have. They want all our money. They don't want to go to war with us. They think we're fat and lazy. No, I'm saying that. I'm sorry. Fat's a bad word. I get it. But, I know how to say it in Chinese. They think we're fat and lazy. And they don't think we deserve the lifestyle that we're living, particularly since they were colonized and raped and robbed and pillaged. They want revenge. Please continue.
Don't we need green technology? We need EVs. We need solar panels. It's been a big push by the Biden administration. So what are you afraid of?
Well, we do. And there's going to be a growing, we expect and we hope, because we want to deal with climate change, we expect a global economy in which the demand will be increasing. And there's nothing wrong with investing in these industries and developing capacity.
Because we do it, the Inflation Reduction Act.
We do it too. We just want to make sure that we're not driven out of business and that our firms and workers have opportunities in these industries, which will be important ones in our future.
If they don't shift, are we looking at potential tariffs on these products?
Well, I wouldn't rule anything out at this point.
Stop. She wouldn't rule it out. No, that's a very soft answer. The answer would have been, if they were serious about this, yes, we're going to tariff them out of the country, because that's what Trump has said. Trump has said if he's reelected, 60. Well, first I heard 100, then I heard 60. But if Trump's reelected, there's going to be dramatic nationalization of our supply chains. Dramatic. Please continue.
We need to keep everything on the table. Want to work with the Chinese to see if we can find a solution.
Stop. We've been working with the Chinese to find a solution my entire business career. The solution is this. We're either going to integrate with the Chinese and continue, because when you go on down to Walmart, you can say, well, no, Professor Penn, I bought that thing that said made in Thailand. Guess what? It was made by a Chinese company. Oh, I bought it. It was made in Vietnam. That was made by a Chinese company in Vietnam. Oh, it was made in Malaysia. That was made by a Chinese company in Malaysia. Oh, it was made in Spain. It's a Chinese company in Spain. Oh, it was made in Mexico. It's made by a Chinese company in Mexico. These people are organized. While we're tearing each other's throats out, calling each other maggots and communists, and when we're not together as a people, we're getting pants. Now, there's only one kind of people in China, really. They have some ethnic groups. They're all suppressed. Some are in concentration camps like the Uyghurs. But it's a Han Chinese culture. People are culturally united. There's only like 20 last names in the country, 20 main ones, okay? Here we have this heterogeneous culture. To get it under control, and let me tell you what I think is happening. I think the powers that be, that would be our PhDs in our academic institutions, I think they've looked at the Chinese model, which is a top-down, authoritarian control model, and they say, whoa, that's good. And I think what we're doing here is we're moving in the direction of state capitalism. The reporter even asked Yellen, isn't that kind of like the Inflation Reduction Act? It's exactly like it. We are moving into state subsidy of industry, state planning of industry, just like the Chinese have. And I'm going to say again, the difference today is the work ethic of the Chinese people is 6 days a week, 7 till 10. They're working all the time. They like working. They're hardworking. I respect it. And their people are, because I've been there a long time, their people didn't know really very much about business. These people are much better business people than I am now. I respect what they're doing. I really do. I don't have any quarrel with the Chinese people. Uh, they don't believe in Christ. They don't believe in God, but they have a strong ethical backbone to what they do. You can walk in any Chinese city at night, any of them, Shanghai. I've done it. You can walk 2 o'clock in the morning down an alley and nobody's going to mess with you. There's no crime there to speak of. Of course, the penalties for crime are very dramatic and very swift, but the people have a clear idea of right and wrong. They have a Confucian ethic, which you can go look up. Their religion was stripped away from them when Mao took over in 49 because Mao was a communist, a Marxist. And, Marx said that religion was the opiate of the people. Marxism is an anti-religious philosophical movement. So they don't have religion there, but they maintain their family structure. They maintain the interdependency of the people. They maintain their rights and wrongs, and they retained a great emphasis on working. And because there's not very little spiritual there, it's very material. They're like Americans when it comes to this. Who wins the game is who has the most, let me be rude, who has the most girlfriends, who has the most cars, who's got the biggest bank account. They're playing a game and they want to win. And that's what we're confronting. And we had that in this country for many years, and we had a lot of prosperity here. And we've given that up for many reasons. And now Janet Yellen is telling us a story. Please continue.
We are engaging in a 4-year review of Section 301 tariffs. That's not complete, so I can't really speak to what will come of it. I wouldn't rule anything out, but I think we need to deal with this issue.
Those were the tariffs that were imposed during the Trump administration.
That's right.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Okay, so they had 4 tranches of Section 301 tariffs. If you remember, it was Trump went 10%, Xi went 10%, and they kept one-upping each other. But because we import much more of Chinese products than the Chinese import of American products, Xi ran out of powder and Trump kept on going. Well, let me tell you where this is at. There was 4 tranches of tariffs. 2 were legal, for sure. 2 may have been illegal. They just got caught up in the heat of it. So there's actually a lawsuit right now in the Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn Tranche 3 and Tranche 4 of Trump's Section 301 tariffs. That's why she says we're not sure what we're going to do. Because I'm going to tell you something that Biden might do. I'm not making a prediction like a fortune teller. I'm just going to show you an option. As I came in today, inflation is much higher than they anticipated because they keep printing money. All they would have to do to crush the Republicans in this election is, number one, decide to take off those tariffs in about, June or July, because that's a 25% reduction in cost immediately. It will look to what they call the low information voter as if inflation disappeared. We'll have negative inflation. And then, if that lawsuit is allowed to go through and they rule that 3 and 4 were illegal, they will give back to the supply chain about $3 trillion. It'll be the biggest stimulus in American history. You can say, oh, Professor Penn, we don't have that money. Do they care? They'll just print it. They'll dump it into the economy. Will be a wash in cash. Everybody will think that, money came out of the sky, which it will have. And Biden will be reelected because there'll be no inflation and everybody will be fat and happy. That's a possibility. That's why she says, we don't know what we're going to do, because they're not quite sure what they're going to do with this. Please continue.
Did you hear about that in the meetings?
They usually raise the issue of the 301 tariffs. They've said for a long time that they would like to see them reduced. Of course, they were put in place because there were findings of unfair trade practices against the United States. And Vice Premier who's my counterpart, and I have agreed that while trade and investment between our two countries is beneficial and desirable, it needs to be on a level playing field. And in a number of ways, we feel it's not. So really raising this issue in that context. I think we also feel, especially after the pandemic, that the resilience of our supply chains is something we need to pay more attention to. And being overly dependent on any single country for a very important good that's used in your economy can lead to a dangerous fragility in supply chains. And in the case of some of these clean energy goods, electric batteries, the minerals that go into them, solar panels, we have been very, very heavily dependent on China. And that's another reason that we and other countries want to have some domestic capacity ourselves.
You mentioned other countries, but China
That's
has
good.
been
Thank you very
flooding
much.
Europe, for instance.
So, because the demand destruction associated with high interest rates has emptied the pockets of the U.S. consumer, the deficit last year with China, in other words, the amount of money that we gave to them in excess of what they gave to us, the trade deficit, the money we just gave them, was $279 billion. That's pretty dependent. Now, it's way down, but it's way down not because the supply chains have shifted away from Chinese companies. The Chinese have decentralized to avoid this argument. They've gone all over the world. They've gone into Spain, Morocco, Pakistan, Mexico, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand. They're everywhere. And so the trade deficit reduction with Chinese firms from some 600 or 700 billion down to 279 billion is two factors. One, we're spending less money because we don't have it. But two, they've decentralized. When you look at the overall trade deficit number last year, it was almost $800 billion. And it's still almost completely with Chinese-owned firms that have decentralized. Chinese are really good at this. The question we need to ask ourselves as Americans is, are we going to demand that a higher percentage of the goods that we buy are manufactured here in the United States? It's a very simple question. And if we want to avoid government dependency, because when there's no jobs, people become dependent. If we want to avoid government dependency, we're going to have to, through the electoral process, elect representatives that support policies which create the conditions for investment, manufacturing investment here in the United States. I'm a strong proponent of that. No, I've sold a lot of imported product in my life. I had that Jerry Maguire moment. And I'm not saying we stop doing business with the Chinese. I'm not saying we go to war with the Chinese. I'm saying I would like to participate in the distribution of goods made here right in the United States. And I'm doing it, and I like it. And for example, if you go to tireget.com, it's a pitch, but I mean, it's emblematic. If you go to tireget.com, we have a lot of product on that website that is made in the United States by union labor right here in the United States. It's a lot more expensive. I mean, you're going to pay twice as much or even 3 times as much for an American-made tire. And the quality, really, frankly, there's really no difference in the quality. Isn't that interesting? Now, there was a difference 10 years ago, but there isn't today. The Chinese have really caught up. In fact, they've really shot by our established firms because they're using really high-end fourth industrial revolution robotics to build their products. Their products are really high quality. But I want to support a guy that's building tires in North Carolina or a guy that's building tires in Oklahoma. So I am actually asking my customers, and if you call in, you're going to get this question. Are you willing to buy a tire made in the United States if it costs more? And if the answer is yes, I'm going to suggest those products. And if every business just gave that option and we found the people that wanted to spend a little bit more, what's the result of that? That means an American citizen keeps their job. Right now, and I talked about this on a podcast, a very large tire factory in Oklahoma that's been around for 40 years that employs 3,000 Americans It's going to be shut down next year because the people that own that factory can't make any money because of imports. And we're going to lose all of our tire factories in the United States. And why is it happening? Because no one has any money. So if you come and you call me and I say, well, that's $200 for an American-made tire, but you can get the same thing for $100, so you're going to spend $800 or $400. Well, if you were flush with cash, it's easier to have principles. When you don't have the cash, it's hard to have that principle. And as long as they keep printing this money and the inflation stays high and the American people have no money, we're actually exacerbating this problem. And I say this over and over again. These people are either grossly incompetent. I'm talking about the PhDs that create this policy. They're either stupid and act like they're smart. And I know these people, they're not stupid. So they're not acting. Okay? They're smart. This must be what they want. They must want a society that is no longer self-governing and is no longer independent and free, that we all depend on the government, which aggrandizes their power. There's no other explanation for this for me. And actually, we could have, an economic policy in the country where we would encourage the creation of fourth industrial revolution factories, which would lower costs. We'd have to have a lot of them, but we're important half the things that we use in every industry. Come on. I want to see my fellow American citizens have jobs. I think having a job and being independent is a hell of a lot more valuable than saving $100 on a tire. I'll leave it up for you to tell me if I'm right or wrong. And I just want to take and say, in closing on this, these arguments are complicated, and we're going to keep coming back to it. And we're working on this because we have to find a way to talk to our fellow citizens about this. Because when you turn your entire country into a purely materialist framework, then the only thing people care about is themselves and their own pocketbook. We don't care one for another. We don't care about our neighbors. We don't even know their names. We don't care. We only care about me, 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 me. Materialism breeds narcissism. A rebalance to the spiritual breeds love your neighbor as you want to be loved yourself. Well, where did all these ideas come from? Man, we got to know where we came from to deal with where we are and chart a course out of this mess, assuming it's possible. And we founded this country, and when I say we is because, when you come out of a traditional culture like I do, when I read the founding documents of the country, because my brain's been altered by ritual, I just say, wow, Thomas Paine, he's talking right to me. I can hear his voice in my head. Thomas Jefferson, when I read his papers, wow, I really relate. I mean, I'm not just reading words on a page. I feel as if I'm there myself. That's a really cool thing to work on if you want to break out of the material. Sit down. I remember the first time it happened to me. I was reading Sigmund Freud in 1977 at Haverford College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I'm reading Freud, and suddenly, instead of my normal voice in my head, I'm hearing Freud's voice in my head. And I'm thinking, oh, you're tripping. But actually, I just broken through to another level in my own world, and I'm entitled to my own world. No one gets to tell me that I have mental illness, because when I read Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, I feel as if I'm sitting there with them. Or if I read Mark and I can feel the words of Christ come off those pages, and I feel like he's talking directly to me. And someone's going to say, well, you're schizophrenic, Professor Penn. Great. I'm very happy to be a schizophrenic in that way. I do hear voices in my head. You might want to let go and try it. That would be called, in a religious perspective, the Holy Ghost, or the ability to move around time and space and gain information. Physicists talk about matter as information. We can tap information. Our brains have that capacity. Now, I'm saying things that maybe sound strange to you, but we have entire U.S. government programs that exploit this human capability. The CIA runs programs teaching people how to remote view, how to read not cars, cards. Well, that's how you start out, card reading. Guy sits there and goes, what card is it? Well, you got a 1 out of 52 chance of being right. That's where it starts. But eventually you can actually feel the pattern of those cards. Your success rate goes up. I talked the last time, slowing your heart rate down. That's not supposed to be a normal skill, but they teach it. Go watch that movie that Clint Eastwood did about that sniper. They talk about you have to pull the trigger between the heartbeats. You have to sense your heartbeat. You got to relax. These are skills that are taught in secret societies that are not taught to every American citizen, but we could turn our public schools into secret societies. Oh, that would breed an entire culture of free people. And that's exactly what they don't want. That's why they make us stupid. That's why Bob Marley sang this beautiful song where he said, we build your schools, we build your penitentiaries, brainwash education to make us the fools. And he knew that in the 60s. Come on. We got to figure out what these people are doing, what their game is. And at the very start of this country, when I read the founding documents of the country, there is so much soaring philosophy and rhetoric in there that's breathtaking in its beauty. There were people that founded this country that really wanted to create a new Jerusalem. They really believed in the concept of self-governance. They really believed that self-governance was about strengthening your spiritual borders such that you didn't have to be governed. And they were farmers. These people were living out in nature. There was no telephones and cell phones. If you wanted to talk to your pal, you got on a horse and rode into town and met him at the bar. And that was not a quick trip. Like today, if I want to meet somebody at the bar, I get in the car, I drive there, we spend an hour, we have a hamburger and a beer, and I go home. Hey, if I had to go by horseback to meet my buddy Ricky, it'd take me all day to get there. We'd hang out for a couple days at the inn because it took a day to get there. People really delved into things. They really grappled with stuff. In that ride on the way, number one, you could be attacked, so you were paying attention, which right away gets you out of your materialism. And then you're in nature the whole way going through the forest. This is a completely different formatting of human consciousness. We can't relate to it, but we can think about it and start to relate to it. Like when you go buy your axe, please don't hurt yourself. Professor Penn must put a cautionary on here. If you're playing with an axe, you can kill yourself. Please pay attention to what you're doing, okay? You might even want to start with cutting vegetables. Does everybody cut vegetables? Isn't that fun to cut up an onion? When the country started, there were some phenomenal philosophers. But guess what? Wherever there is good, evil is close at hand. And for every phenomenal philosopher, we had an enslaver. We had both things working in this country at its start simultaneously. We hadn't sorted things out. This is the time in 2024 we have to start to sort out. Where does my self-image come from? Now, I got a lot of younger people. I look at the demographics on YouTube. I know I got a lot of younger people. And each cohort of people has a different zeitgeist or a different self-image that we have. My self-image, okay, I've done this. I can play the violin professionally. I can play the piano. I can sing. I've done this. I've done that. I got a whole list of things, okay? And that's my self-image. But that's not all of my self-image. I grew up in the 1960s when the United States was supremely powerful. And here's another thing. Everybody that ran the country was white. Okay, white. Then Martin Luther King popped up, and Muhammad Ali popped up, and Malcolm X popped up. The next thing I know, we had 4 people getting bussed in from the inner city to my school, Edgecombe School in Highland Park. which was great. And I can remember all their names because they were like aliens, right? Never saw a black person. Second grade, right? I had this self-image, and the image was of being an American. And what did that mean? It meant that we had won World War II, that we were the most powerful country on the earth, and that we had the technological means to protect our country by killing everybody else. I mean, that's what they taught us. And this image goes all the way back to the founding of the country. The country was founded by there was a group of people that wanted an agrarian lifestyle of self-governance. That's the Thomas Jefferson types. They were viewing this as a very spiritual opportunity. And then with them came all the folks that were into the slaving business and the drug business and the war business. Because guess what? We were a colony of the British. And what is the colonial model? It's slavery, drugs, and piracy. So we had people that were over here trying to escape that model. And we had people over here that were trying to exploit that model for their own personal material gain. That was the yin yang of the country. Okay, that was it. And we threw off the yoke of British imperialism, and we had a country, 13 states, and away we went. And those two groups went to work on each other. And it's like that meme I talked about at the beginning. Science will give you a rocket that flies to the moon, and religion will give you a plane that'll fly into a building. And this is why someone came to me and said, you need to talk about the benefits of what it is to be spiritual. Don't talk about spiritual borders. Too much work. All you have to do is be spiritual. Well, there was so much industrial revolution, so much gain, so much human progress because America was a watershed moment in throwing off the divine right of kings and the domination of the church. It opened a tremendous space for creativity. And that creativity went into what? Making money. Lands to be conquered, industries to be started. And we had a lot of people over here that were not very spiritual. A genocide was perpetrated on the native citizens of the country. A genocide. They were killed or they were removed from their native lands. And that was good. When I was a kid, I know the younger people, you probably didn't play cowboys and Indians. We did. I was born in the 50s. The Western was a big deal. We still played cowboys and Indians. And if you got picked to be an Indian, you died during the game. It's just, we had that. That was our self-image. That was our self-image. Carrying a 6-gun, killing the Indians. It was righteous. It was fenced as righteous because much like the Palestinians didn't do anything with the land, so the Israelis had every right to push them off, the Indians weren't doing anything in the land. They didn't develop its material possession or the Native Americans did not develop the material potential of their lands. Therefore, they were illegitimate somehow. Their spiritual connection to the land was unrecognized and not valued. Okay, great. This was a concept called manifest destiny. It came out of a kind of a Calvinist Protestantism that the white man, the white Protestant man, was destined to conquer and rule America from sea to shining sea. And manifest destiny is part of my self-image, whether I know it or not. It plays out in the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, where we believe as Americans that the Democrat liberal order is the end of history. It's the best, truest, and greatest form of politics in the history of the world. We don't need to do anything else. And what it really is just colonialism and manifest destiny rebranded, like Janet Yellen sitting up there telling me a story that I've been hearing for 30 years. It's the same story, just repackaged. And what did we do once we got control of the country? We started meddling in the affairs of countries all over the world. Mexico. How many people know that we had a Mexican-American war and we took like 500,000 square miles away from the Mexicans, including Texas and Arizona and part of California? We just robbed it from them. We took it. And you know what the Mexicans want? They want it back. That's why there's this little tension between the United States and Mexico. because we went to war with them and we took their country away from them because of this concept that the white Protestant Calvinist man was going to rule the country from sea to shining sea. And I don't know how many of us are really aware of that and how important that is to our self-image, or the self-image of science, that we conquered polio, that we've reduced infectious disease, that we have all these new techniques to extend life. And somehow, I feel proud about that. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, but somehow that kind of bleeds over into my self-image. That we have all these nuclear weapons kind of makes me a badass, doesn't it? I'm 64. I don't plan on getting in any more fights. It could happen, but I'm not planning on it. When I was younger, I planned on it. I looked for it. And that was part of my self-image. My country was a badass. We conquered the Indians, Native Americans, but we called them Indians. We took the country away from the Mexicans. We got involved in all kinds of wars all over the world, everywhere. I mean, I could just go on and on and on. Panama. We had our U.S. military down in Mexico off and on for years. Nicaragua, the Middle East, everywhere. I mean, we've been everywhere doing whatever the hell we wanted to do. And then we say we're the good guys. We're always doing it to defend democracy. This is bullshit, okay? We're not doing it to defend democracy. We're doing it because we're tripping. We here in the United States believe, and I run into this all the time on X now with the ex-military people, they believe that the post-World War II Democrat liberal order and NATO and the Five Eyes and the power of the United States spread out all over the globe is the true and the good. And I'm thinking to myself, if it's so good, why do we have to coerce people into participating? I mean, if there's something I want to do, because I think it's cool, like, for example, going to pray. I just think it's cool. Nobody had to make me go. Nobody made me go to pray. I liked it. Like practicing piano and learning how to sing. I spent 3-4 hours a day doing that for 15 years. Nobody had to ask me to practice. I wanted to master playing the blues, and I did it, and it's great. It's part of my self-image. I wanted to learn it. But here we are enforcing a political order in the country upon each other and throughout the world coercively through the rule of law, through the power of the military, and through the economic benefits of materialism. This is not going to last. When you coerce people to participate, it's like I would like to say to you, go bring all your friends to watch this podcast, and if you do it, I'm going to pay you. And if you don't do it, I'm going to punish you. People are just going to turn off the podcast because you can. You have that power. But we don't have the power to turn off the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. That's our culture. Let us as American citizens start to sort through our self-image and look at our self-image all the way back to the founding of the country and realize that how we think about each other and how we think about America's role in the world, we didn't come up with this, we inherited it. So when anybody stands up and says, I really don't want to support the Ukraine, my name is Paul and that's between you all, you're immediately a Putin supporter, a coward, a traitor, because you're betraying a self-image that person has, that it's America's right and manifest destiny to spread Americanism throughout the world. And that is a cognitive distortion. We have malfunctioned as a people. And why did we? Because we came from the British. We came from empire. Empire is in our bones like blood is in our veins. And for us to sort this out and start to walk ourselves in self-image, and I mean individually, as individual American citizens, walk back from this and become humble in our ambitions to rebalance ourselves into a more spiritual perspective, that's going to take some work. And we're going to do that work if we understand what the benefit is. And I'm going to leave you with what I think the benefit is. Knowledge and awareness of the Creator. When we fill our hearts and minds with greed and lust and ambition and arrogance, those states of mind block and prevent the communion with the grand intelligence that created me and created this world. And when we start to remove ourselves from those illusions, and they are illusions, they're human illusions, the worst of which is arrogance, that the human mind is the end-all and be-all. When we start taking that out of the equation for ourselves as individuals, we will come into contact with something that will enthrall us, that will fill us with well-being, with humility, with the desire to serve our friends and neighbors, with a purpose, a purposefulness that is lacking in the materialist. The real benefit is the purpose of life is to discover the truth, the search for truth. That is the real, in my opinion, the real reason I'm here is the search for truth. And any illusion that gets in the way of that just slows me down and takes away time and years that I could be in that search. So I'm speaking to you very personally and trying to say that if you don't, of course, if you have the Holy Ghost, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you don't have that, and you're going, what the hell is he talking about? It's real. It's beneficial to your well-being, and it will answer, that connectivity will answer all the fears and all the struggles and all the sadnesses. They will all be in a context that will make your life meaningful and fulfilled. Wish you a very good weekend. We're going to go out with a little more music if the censors will leave it up, because every time I play this music, these are people that have mastered that connectivity. You can hear it in their music. So I wish you a great weekend. I'm going to be trying to come up with some new stuff over the weekend. You're welcome to text me, share with me your ideas. That really helps me when people come and say, talk about this, talk about that. You can make specific requests on YouTube. Professor Penn, please call me David, whatever. Please talk about this. I would love those kind of challenges, and I welcome them. I ask you to call me. Support the channel with Target, with freepeopleradio.com. Go to the store. All blessings upon you. Let us pray for a peaceful weekend. The Iranians have not pulled the trigger, which means at least up till today, they're on somebody's payroll. And let's hope that when we get back together next Tuesday, things are still going in a peaceful direction. Thank you very much.
I'm going to wait for you, my brother.